Hello everyone, welcome back, Not Ever here, as we continue with our series for War in the East. We had to restart, of course. If you're new to the series, you're not exactly sure what's going on, why this man is talking to you, well, this looks like this. The reason is because this is a World War II operational strategy game. Basically, it is set on the Eastern Front between the Soviet Union and the German Axis forces. And the idea of the game is basically to destroy the other side. You know, either as the Russians, you try and push the Germans back, or initially the aggressors, try and push them back all the way to, for example, Berlin here. Try and take that and, of course, beat them. And, of course, if you're the Germans, you're trying to push the Russians back as far as you can and take Moscow here. So that's essentially what the game boils down to. There's a lot of mechanics in the game. I put out a primer video that I'll link now. If you want to go and watch that to understand some of the more intricate parts of the game, you're more than welcome to. Full disclosure, that video doesn't really cover a lot of the mechanics. It's a very deep game. If you like strategy games, if you like really in-depth war games, I would recommend this game very highly. It's a lot of fun. But for the duration of this video, of this series, what we're going to do, instead of actually showing the gameplay, which sounds terrible when I say it like this, but we're going to show kind of like a recap of what's going on in the game, so we can kind of follow the war as it progresses on the side of the Germans, all the way, probably, almost certainly, to my eventual defeat at the hands of the Soviet Union. So what we're going to do essentially is look at the strategy employed by myself as I play the game, and I'll give you like an overlay of the, not an overlay, I'll give you like a recap of the battles that were important, what was important going on in the individual turns and such, and hopefully we'll make this somewhat entertaining to watch. So if you guys have any interest in this, please feel free to let me know. If there's any critiques or any suggestions you have for how to make this more interesting, more engaging, I'm also more than willing to listen to anything you guys have to say. It's definitely going to take a little while here, and you know, I'm not even sure if this is going to work the way I want it to, but you know, here's hoping. So let's embark on this 200 turn journey, which will probably take at least 1 year to complete. So we're going to basically break the game down into 3 army groups, which are the army groups that actually existed at this time period during the original Operation Barbarossa, which is the invasion of Russia by Nazi Germany. So you see here, we'll split into 3 fronts. We have up in the north, we have Army Group North. In the middle, we have the aptly named Army Group Center. And finally, in the south, we have Army Group South. I'm going to show you kind of what each army group is attempting to accomplish here as part of their aims. But the gist is that Army Group North wants to take Leningrad. They want to push right up here along this kind of jutting land here in the Soviet Union and try and take Leningrad so they can link up with the Finnish people who are just also up here, just out of view, and just kind of link up there. So there's not really any more resistance in the north from the Russians. There's Arkhangelsk. I think that's how you say that. The city that's like way, not even on the map, not even in the game, but like way up that way that we'll have to take later. That the Finnish can take maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But basically, that's our main goal here for Army Group North, is to take this city and make sure there's no pockets of resistance up here in the north that the Russians can kind of use to harass us later on after we take Moscow, which is actually Army Group Center's main objective. Good transition right there. I'm very proud of that segue. So for Army Group Center, we're going to do the same thing. It's going to just be a push there, try and take Moscow and hopefully destroy the Russian urge to fight us. If we can take Moscow, if we can crush their political center, then maybe they'll give up, maybe they'll surrender. In game terms, they probably won't. They'll probably keep fighting because I don't think they surrender when they lose Moscow. But historically, that was the aim of the German army, was to take Moscow and to try and force the Soviets to surrender, to capitulate. Even so, in real life, I don't think they probably would have given up quite so easily, but who knows? It's a crazy world. And then finally, in the south, our main goal is going to be to just kind of break out of this, I don't know what you call it, this like hard to move area down here. So you can see there's a ton of units inside of here for the Russians. And there's also quite a few rivers. There's all these rivers in here and stuff like this that makes it kind of difficult to maneuver and such. So what we kind of want to do there is to try and get past those rivers into the open plains over this way, kind of break out this way. We can go down here, that way. Down here is the city of Sevastopol in the Crimea. This way, the Caucasus, not the Russian Caucasus, is that correct? The where the oil is down that way in the far southeast there. Stalingrad's over here. So, I mean, we want to break out, and of course, we want to take Kiev too. We want to just break out in the south and try and get as much terrain as possible, as much land as possible, and push the Russians back as far as we can. Of course, it would also be helpful if we have to be able to flank around there and support an attack on Moscow. But hopefully by the time we get to, where we can support Moscow from the south, we'll already have taken the actual city. So that's basically the overall arcing plan here of the German army. That's kind of what we want to do here. But before we can take Moscow or Leningrad or break out of the south like that, we have to look at the individual turn. And the first turn is probably the easiest, because if we break it down here, we're going to take a look at Army Group North here. So what we'll do here is we'll break it down turn by turn. In the first video, is this turn 0, I'll show you what we're going to plan to do. And then at the end of turn 1, I'll come back and I'll tell you guys all that happened, and we'll end the turn, and we'll give you guys the who's it's on what's going to happen next turn, and what we can plan to do as things unravel and whatnot. So right now, the initial goals we're going to have here is to try and, if you watched the last video, we tried to make it to this river right here, which actually turned out pretty well. I think in the last video before we reset the series, we managed to get a couple units there along the river line. I'd like to redo that again this time. Last time, we also tried to cut off a force over here of the Soviets. We tried to encircle their forces, basically by cutting them off from the actual land of supply. The land of supply sounds like a magical place, but we tried to cut them off from supply from Russian lines. So in last game we did this, we tried to send one troop up there towards just outside of Riga, that city there, right here, the city Riga. We tried to send one panzer group or one panzer unit up here to capture the tile and the terrain right beside Riga and cut off this little peninsula is the wrong word, but this jut of lands here that the hopefully we could have surrendered. And there weren't a lot of units in there. There's a couple units down here and such, and there's a couple over here, but not a great pocket to make. So we tried that, and like an idiot, I didn't realize there was a port here and a port here, that they were both on top of those units. So these guys weren't even out of supply last turn. So we're not going to try and do the same thing where we try and we try and cut those guys off, because they're just going to be resupplied anyways. But what we are going to do, still try and go to the river. So that's the number one plan. We want to send our panzers all the way to the river. Our panzers, of course, being our tanks. They will try their best to make it to the river, create defensive positions wherever we can along here. And then on the next turn, we'll hopefully try and push up north. Just outside of view here, there's a city up here called Pskov. That city is basically the intermediary point between Leningrad and the starting line, which is down here. If we can make it to Pskov on the second turn, that would be fantastic. If we could take that city, that would be great. And it would just kind of help cement our cause. And one of the reasons it would be great to take that city, the same reason it would be great to take the city of Riga this turn, is because in these cities, the Russians have industry. Their heavy industry, their industry that creates armaments, their tanks industry, their all kinds of different things they can create inside of this industry to fund their war efforts and to help supply themselves with supplies, with ammunition, with tanks, with bombs, bullets, all kinds of things. I guess bullets and bombs are ammunition, but that's here nor there. What I'm trying to say here in a very roundabout way is that, but if we can get rid of these industrial places, these industrial centers, it'll be very beneficial for us in the long run. Because what will happen if we don't take this industry away, they will withdraw the industry from the city. They'll move all their factory parts out, and they'll try and move them off map, which basically is like moving them into the center of Russia in real life, is which they attempted to do. And by doing that later on in the war, about 2 or 3 years down the line, maybe even less than that, the Russians were able to provide themselves with a lot of armaments, with a lot of additional goods for combat with the Germans, which eventually allowed them to win a war of attrition over the Germans. In this case, we don't want that to happen. We are the Germans. We are perhaps on the wrong side of history, but we still want to win this war as best we can. To do that, taking cities like Riga and Pskov up here, which we can't see, is the best option for us. So in addition to moving up to this, the panzers up here to the line here along the river, I'd also like to take one panzer and just strike right through this line here and go and take the city of Riga itself. If we can do that on turn 1, that would be a great turn 1 for Army Group North. We'll put our one panzer here, we'll attack the city, and hopefully we'll push them out of the city and be able to take it and be able to take their industry out of action. Now, other than that, I mean, our army will just have to push up here. We have with us two armies. Well, actually, technically, the entirety of Army Group North consists of two armies, two infantry armies, which is the goodness, I think it's the 16th Army. Let me see if I can check here. The 18th Army, sorry, and this is the 16th Army. Okay, and then of course we have the 3rd Panzer. Oh my God, why can't I remember these names? We have the 4th Panzer Group. Okay, so we have a Panzer Group, which is basically the equivalent of a Panzer Army. And then we have, let me get rid of that. So we have one Panzer Army. Just leave that there. And we have two infantry armies. So basically we have a fair number of troops up in the north, but as you'll see in a second, it's not as many troops as we have in the south, in the in Army Group Center. But it should be enough to get us to Leningrad. So that's going to be our plan. Get to the river, take Riga, and hope for the best that everything works out. So if we go ahead and we look down here, we look at the Army Group Center, we get an idea now of what it's going to be like to actually make the push on Moscow. If we hold on one second, here we go. Okay, we got it. So over here in the distance is the city of Moscow. You'll notice that there are kind of a couple groupings of troops. So there's one group here, one group here, one group here. That is basically covering the route towards Moscow that we're going to take. We're going to basically send this entire army group all the way along here and try and capture Moscow as quickly as possible. It'll probably take us, well, hopefully we can do it in a couple of weeks, like not a couple of weeks literally, but hopefully, you know, in maybe a month or two, and maybe, 6 to 8 weeks we can do it. We can take it like historically the Germans expected the campaign to last, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. Hopefully that's how long this campaign lasts for us. If we can just push our way right through these troops and get all the way into Moscow, that would be fantastic. Before we can do that, though, of course, we have to look back here at the opening moves we're going to have to make in order to get ourselves all the way up there. And if we take a look here, what we did last time was we took our forces and split them. We took one Panzer group here in the south, we brought them up, we brought another Panzer Corps, sorry, two Panzer Corps, and we cut off this big section of troops here. The reason we did that was because when troops in this game get cut off, what happens is they are prone to surrender. And surrender is very good if you are trying to get rid of troops. Normally, if you attack a unit and they rout or they shatter, which means that their morale basically breaks, that they are forced to flee from the field of combat, and they kind of, in a disorganized way, run away from the fight, then they can run a really far away. So, for example, if we were to attack this tank right here, and he routs, he could go all the way back here on like one turn, and he'd end up in this spot. If you're trying to destroy an army, having to chase down, keep chasing down these units over like 10 tiles is not very efficient. It's not a very good way to fight the war. What can happen though is if you cut units off, so if we link up around here, for example, we take over all the terrain around this pocket of troops is under our control. What will happen is if we attack units next turn after the one turn has passed where they haven't been able to restore connection with the rest of their troops, if for example they don't manage to take this tile back here and they remain cut off, what will happen is whenever we attack them, instead of routing or shattering, if they were going to rout or shatter, they would instead surrender to us, which means all the troops in that unit are completely taken off the board. They're captured, they're removed from the game. That includes also artillery pieces, planes, stuff like that is also gone. So it's very beneficial to try and get rid of troops as much as possible. If we take a look here at a division for the Germans, we have about 17,000, just short of 17,000 men in a group in a one infantry division. The Russians probably have about half. So even if they have like 8,500 men in a single division here, and we were to take that off the board, if you take 10 infantry divisions off the board early on in the game, that's 85,000 men you've just captured and eliminated from the game, which is very beneficial. The last thing you want to do is get into a prolonged battle of attrition with the Soviet Union. They will win every time. Every single time they will beat you. So that is why it's so vital in this game for Germany to quickly eliminate the Soviets. And I mean, that's really the only way to win. Because if you get rid of all their troops so they can't push you back when the winter months come, should the war last that long, they won't have as many troops to fight you. It'll be a lot easier to keep pushing them back instead of being pushed back yourself. So with all that nonsense out of the way, what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and do a big envelopment all the way around Minsk. We're going to try and capture this entire section of troops here. In the north, we're going to send one Panzer group this way. We're going to try and get him well, that's probably about where he's going to go, actually. He's going to probably go to about there this turn. But the next turn, let's try that again. We're going to try and send one guy all the way over here to get behind Minsk. In the south, we're going to send another group up here like this, and we're going to try and link up somewhere around here. We tried this last game, but we did it a turn too late, I think, and it kind of backfired on us. A lot of these guys in this pocket here were able to escape over towards the river here, and they were able to build a nice defensive line on this side. Instead, we decided to pocket these troops over here, and we kind of lost time. If we can get all the troops over here, we can get units behind both sides of Minsk and capture this entire pocket. I think it'll be very beneficial for us to remove all of those units, all of those troops. So we're going to take the Panzer, I believe the 3rd Panzer Group here in the north. We're going to send them, of course, you know, again behind here, but we're also going to send one troop down here, one corps that way, and in the south, one corps that way, and then the rest over this way. And that'll hopefully give us our big encirclement, but if it doesn't, we'll also have this encirclement over here, so these troops won't be able to surrender. We'll cut them off around here, and even if we don't get the entirety of this pocket, we'll have at least one little pocket over here. That's going to be our main goal here on the first turn. Along this axis here, along our border here, we're also not going to push up very much this turn. We might kind of push on the sides here. So right about here, we might kind of push in a little bit, and right about here, push a little bit to try and kind of make it more of a circular pocket. But I don't want to give too many casualties to our forces by trying to attack in like this. I think that it would just be a loss of life. I think they have some good fortifications along the border here as well. So for example, even though we could make some of these guys surrender, I don't think I want to do that. Also, another downside would be if we attack them and we hit them with overwhelming force to push them out of their positions, I don't want them to rout out of the pocket. So if we attack all these guys here and they all decide to rout, and they route back this way, for example, out to here, then we suddenly have our troops that have tried to surround the pocket like this, and we have all kinds of guys outside of the pocket that we've created, which is not what we want. So that's why we're only going to attack here on the sides like this, and then of course circle around like this. That's what we're going to do for Army Group Center. Hopefully we can make that big pocket work. If we can't, well, we might be in a little bit of trouble later on, but hopefully it works out. If you're confused as well by the strategy that we're trying to employ, you're trying to figure out how the game mechanics work, we're going to kind of skip over game mechanics. I can't remember if I said that already. I had an issue earlier where I made this video and it didn't record properly, so I had to record it again. So I'm not exactly sure what I've said now. I think, though, what's important to know is that the mechanics aren't very important. If you want to learn the game, I think it's a great game to play. It's a lot of fun, but I'm kind of just doing this as a kind of a way of showing what's happening in the game that I'm playing without really having to delve too deeply into the mechanics themselves. So don't worry about it if you're lost. Feel free to ask questions for anyone in the comments. Feel free to go crazy, and I will try to answer them as best as possible. But elsewise, it's not that important to know, which sounds stupid for a game you're playing, but it's true. All right, so let's take a look now at Army Group South here. And Army Group South is, actually, to go back to Army Group North for a second, what's important to know about that Army Group is, in the north, if you remember, we had one Panzer Army, so I'll put Panzer Army. We had 2 infantry, that is not even words, 2 infantry armies. In Army Group South, we also have 1 Panzer Army and 2 infantry armies. But in Army Group Center, we have 2 inf armies, and we have 2 Panzer armies. That is important because that makes Army Group Center the most important or the most powerful of the army groups. Of course, they have to cover the most ground on the way to Moscow. These guys down here have a bit of an advantage in that they only have to get so far. For example, Kiev is basically the main objective early on in the campaign. After that, we can, of course, go down in the south towards the Crimea, where Sevastopol is, or we can try and race east towards the Stalingrad or Kharkov and other cities over there, or we can try and go north and help attacks on Moscow. But for right now, this flank doesn't have to be that strong. It can just basically be focused on taking Kiev and making its way down towards Sevastopol, basically towards the Crimea. So with that in mind, what we're going to do down here in the south is we're going to try and take 1 Panzer Corps, and we're going to try and rush them all the way down here towards the Romanian border, which is exactly what we did last time. No deviation in the strategy this time. It's going to be just like it was in the last game. I think it worked out very well. We're going to try and encircle Lvov as quickly as possible. And by, of course, encircle, I mean if we can connect with the Romanian border, they'll be cut off. The Soviet troops in here will all be cut off from their own supply line if we can keep units in here along our own axis, along this attack. And in doing that, it'll make these troops in here a lot easier to consolidate and liquidate later on when we attack along our border here. Similar to how we're going to treat the middle, though, I mean, the Army Group Center, how we're going to treat that pocket. We're not going to attack here at the center here with our troops. The reason is because I think there's quite a few fortifications along these units here. So these guys could be very hard to dislodge. And I feel like it would be a waste of life. It would be a waste of resources if we were to go and attack these guys when they were at their strongest. What we should do is send our troops, send our panzers all the way down here, even farther if you can, and try and take up a position here along the border and cut off all these troops in here. Now, not only will that cut off those troops in there, but it'll also, similar to the north, cut off the resources that are the industry that is in Lvov. If we let Lvov escape with its industry on the next turn, it's going to come back to bite us in the butt later on. I guarantee it. So hopefully we can make it all the way down here. We can cut them off and we can get rid of the industry in Lvov. And we can, of course, next turn begin to attack towards the city. Now, I'm not really in any rush. Of all the army groups, of all the three, I feel like I could take the most amount of time in the south. If my forces take a while to get rid of all these troops as they did in the last game, that's okay. I don't really care. I'd rather have Army Group North get as far north as possible and Army Group Center get a big pocket and then just kind of wait in the south to see what happens. There are definitely a lot of troops here near the border in the south, but I feel like it's not as big a deal if they escape. They're not really in a good position to stop me on my way to Moscow, which is the main target here early on. So Army Group South is more of like, not a diversion, but it's more of a, it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit, it's secondary, I guess. I can't think of a better word than secondary right now. It's something that's, you know, important, but it can wait. So that's what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do for the first turn. Again, if you guys have any suggestions, any critiques, feel free to let me know in the comments. Feel free to message me. I think if you can message me on YouTube, I'm not sure. But other than that, guys, hopefully I'll be back very shortly. We can get the next couple of videos up and we can get on with this campaign, get back to turn 5 where we were. And yeah, guys, until next time, thank you for watching. And I hope you guys have a great day.